Hi. Hi, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you very much to Slack for welcoming me in this very cool event. I have to say that I'm very excited to make this talk at Spec with Slack in San Francisco. That's why I've made a long trip to join this meeting. Actually, I have traveled all around the globe through Iceland, very close to the North Pole, by plane, okay, from France. Yes, I'm French. I hope you like my exotic accent and that you will understand what I'm talking about. So I'm the CEO of MailClark, a French startup of 9 people based in Lyon, second city after Paris, very close to the French Alps. I don't want to bother you with MailClark, but in a few words, if you consider that Slack's goals are to improve internal communication in your team, MailClark is a Slack bot whose goal is to improve external communication. We allow people using Slack to send and receive emails to the outside world, your customers, your lawyer, and to do that without leaving Slack. But actually today, I'm here to talk about onboarding. It won't be a theoretical lecture about onboarding. I just want to share with you our experience about 3 years of continuous iteration. I'll show you 5 key iterations, with our onboarding process, and each time I try to say what was a success and what was a mistake from the point of view of user experience. And I hope it will be useful for you as a software developer. We developed Clubble.io, our first Slack app, in 2015. Actually, it was the result of a pivot because we had previously developed another application, Clubble.com. We have always been convinced that email is a very powerful tool. So we wanted to reinvent email groups for companies in order to reinvent collaboration. We were very ambitious. But at this time, it was already clear that Slack was the best company for reinventing collaboration. And you know, it's better to be a friend of Slack rather than to be a competitor of Slack. But we were still convinced of the power of email. We then decided to pivot and to launch Clubble.io, which was a software that could allow you to install an email group in a Slack channel. So here is the first screen of our first onboarding in August 2015. This is the screen you could see after you push the button Add to Slack, after OAuth. For technical guys in the room, I guess we have some. So we had a very simple software, so we absolutely wanted to have a simple onboarding. Onboarding at this time was made in a browser, not in Slack itself, because at this time it was easier for us to do what we wanted to do in a browser, because Slack wasn't fully featured as it is now, and we had more freedom to do whatever we wanted. So here, you can see that the user was invited to choose the Slack channel where he wanted MailClark to be present, to fill the emails of the external people he wanted to communicate with, and to choose the subject appearing in the subject of the emails. And last is language. That's all. The email group was ready to go. After clicking, we were now back to Slack, and at this step, everything was ready for sending every message written in the Slack channel to an external list of emails and receiving the answers. You could then mix a conversation between pure Slack users and pure email users. You can see, for example, the beginning of a conversation where Pierre, working in Slack, invited Elizabeth from England to participate to the debate. Elizabeth uses email, of course, and she can now exchange his royal point of view with the Slack team, despite the fact that she will probably never go into Slack. Well, maybe one day, I don't know, in fact. What were the results of this first onboarding? Well, we can say, in fact, that it was our first success. The process was a fluid experience. A good point is that it was a one-step setup. People don't like configuration. The shorter, the better. Secondly, there was almost nothing to learn to get started. Once the setup was made, it was almost self-explaining. I have to confess that in addition to the onboarding, we always push our bot, MailClark, to explain very carefully what is he precisely doing. Oh my God. Whoa, so terrible. And three, the localized experience. It's always better when users can work in their own language. It was in English and in French. And to give you an order of magnitude, we had at this time 250 teams onboarded with this process. But a lot of them vanished away. In fact, the first week churn was not less than 19%. Not bad, but really too much if you want to make serious business. So you can see here some reactions from our first users. First point, we at MailClark were very happy to have a setup in the browser. But the opinion of some of the users wasn't the same. Just take me to Slack, they said. And more serious, the software was considered too basic. It was just little more than a proof of concept. We then still had the hard work to do again. Even for us, in fact, Clubble.io was too basic. We already wanted to offer a fully featured email bot. We then gave up the brand Clubble and we launched MailClark. MailClark is a play on words with email and clerk. The guy with the mustache is the clerk of email. I hope you understand this wordplay because it has been created especially for American people. So we have a new bot. We needed a new onboarding, of course. This time, since the software was a little more complicated, we decided that we had to be very didactical to really teach users how to get the maximum out of MailClark. We then introduced the onboarding process with what we call the test emails channel. That is a channel you could, in a way, call sandbox, a place where you can play without any risk. So right after the add to Slack, after OAuth, if you prefer, users were displayed a very simple web page, but this page was only here for a confirmation that everything was ready. Just had to click on the button you can see, and you were redirected to Slack. Here we are in this channel, which is created mostly for the guy we call the champion, the team leader. And here takes place a conversation between MailClark and the champion. You can see here the first step, how to send an email from Slack. As we introduced a lot of new commands, it was very important to be didactical, precise, very step-by-step. You can see on this slide that MailClark said very precisely what the user had to type to make it work. And it worked. What was the result of this onboarding process? Good point. It was very integrated in Slack. We wanted it to be quite invisible. Objective, zero web interface. People wanted to stay in Slack. They could stay in Slack. Secondly, we really engage users by getting them to practice. In fact, the users were nearly obliged to learn. MailClark school was a very classical school. You could learn step by step at your rhythm, like a young student. And 3, a dedicated channel is a good sandbox because you feel comfortable. You're not afraid of making mistakes. That's very important. It's not a shame of asking for help. You're not exposed to the rest of your team, and people appreciate it. On the other side, many people found that we had gone too far in the Slack integration, and the apparition of new commands wasn't a good news for everyone. You can read that in the reaction of some users on the slide. In fact, well, it's difficult to make everyone happy. The software, in fact, was richer, but we didn't succeed to keep the user experience simple. And regarding the complete integration to Slack with no interface, in fact, we've been too purist. In France, we say plus royaliste que le roi, more royalist than the king himself. That wasn't a good news for the population of our little kingdom. As a result, we left it at a terrible pace of 25% on the first week. We had lost fluidity. It was too complex. We then made a third iteration based on the Slack/invite command. We first removed some of the commands we were so proud of having invented before. And for the onboarding, now you just had to invite MailClark wherever you need it. Wherever you need him. I don't know if I have to say it or him. So here is the page after the Add to Slack button. In fact, it was a two-way onboarding this time. You can see that we send people back to Slack and suggest them to invite MailClark in the channel of their choice, but in the same time, we used the direct message to give support and help to users. You learned to use MailClark in a series of direct messages with MailClark that could teach you all the possible use cases. You can see in that list that MailClark could now do a lot of other things than just sending emails to Elizabeth. In fact, direct messages is also a good place. Is also a good place for teaching people how to use your software, because again, users don't want to make mistakes in a public place. That's really nothing worse than that. So what results for this onboarding? A lot of users had a native field. Just inviting the bot was a good thing. It made a big simplification. But on the other point, the focus on use case was very positive as well. In fact, you always gain to be user-oriented rather than technical-oriented. And last but not least, there were less commands, but not less feature. They were just simpler to use because they were replaced by pop-up likes. In fact, we didn't want to be purist anymore, but rather pragmatic. And users seemed to like it. As a result, the first week churn was much better, 18%, you can see on the left. But as you can see, our process was simplified, but it wasn't simple. And a problem appeared we didn't anticipate it. In fact, you can see a bunch of user reaction that shows that a lot of people wasn't able to invite MailClark. You have 3 of them, and we had reaction like that every day. In fact, we naively thought that all Slack users knew how to use Slack commands. That's not the case. It was a mistake. So be careful about that. So let's go to another iteration, number 4. A lot of things appear at this stage, the concept of inbox, and the fact that we consider now that the users firmly prefer clicks over commands. We also here introduced new services, such as the possibility to communicate with your Facebook page and your Twitter account. And a little detail, we started to monetize. Here is the onboarding. No more commands, just clicks. And now the onboarding is 100% made in Slack with message menus. You just add a menu that actually allowed you to create an inbox that invited MailClark in the channel of your choice. And everything was made automatically. Just after that, you were invited to choose which service you wanted to connect to your new created inbox, email, Twitter, or Facebook. You can see that at this time, we were able to use the newly created Slack buttons, and you even add a hamburger menu. We were very proud of that. The results, very good point, is that we made the most of buttons and menus, and the fact of removing commands whenever possible was really good news for users. The fact of needing a little Slack know-how is positive too. Every Slack user is not a developer. I repeat it, but people don't like to write lines of code when they are using a software, even though they are used to it. The most natural way to interact for a lot of people is probably clicking, that's all. So with buttons and menus, we succeeded to get more interactions, and after all, to keep complexity away. That was a success. We had now 9,600 teams on board. But the bad side is that the abstract concept of inbox was too complicated to understand, and that actually, due to the use of buttons and menus, we were too much integrated to Slack. At this time, we didn't have our own user interface, and I must confess that a lot of users were very troubled, as you can read here in this reaction. As a result, the churn has raised to an unusual rate of 33%. Too abstract, too invisible, in fact, to exist and to be understood. Don't act like a god. Don't live too high in the clouds. You have to prove your existence every day, down to earth, and by material and simple evidence. And now last iteration, number 5, the setup wizard. I call it return of the UI. I could have said back to the future. Excuse me for this bad wordplay. But in fact, what I want to say is that we came back to a browser interface, a setup wizard of our website. This was finally the way to exist and to be understood more clearly. As in the first iteration, we keep people in the browser for setup, as I said, and we simply ask them to choose which service they want to connect to their Slack workspace. You can see that we added some new services like connecting a Gmail account, for example. Then, if you want to connect, let's say your Facebook page, you get to pick the right Facebook page, and after this page, that we don't see, you then choose the channel you want to connect. In fact, it's really a step-by-step wizard, and you have no toolbar, no possibility to going outside the process. In fact, it's a tunnel. And this tunnel leads you to the conclusion that seamlessly the channel of your choice is now connected to the service of your choice. And we only send users back to Slack once things are completely set up. The final result, my favorite chart. You can see on the chart the cohorts of active teams using MailClark every week since the beginning, with the numbers of iteration. You can see on the right part that with the iteration number 5, we obtain a growth as important as in our early days. The slope is very steady and very good for us. In fact, we succeeded to simplify the tunnel works, and users react in a very positive way. I have to say that the result in monetization follows the same curve, and that's a good news for investors. So we are arriving to the end. I won't give you a definitive conclusion about onboarding because, as you can see in this slide, we still have people estimating that the onboarding is still complicated. My real conclusion it's that we still have to work and to iterate on onboarding again and again. It's never finished. But I hope that you will have discovered some of the mistakes you could avoid in the future and discover also some good practices to make the life of your users easier during onboarding. Thank you for your attention. Merci. Thank you. No, I won't take any question. If you have some question, just come to me. I will answer with pleasure. Thank you.